Muted. You're on, Chairman.
Can somebody give me a thumbs up that they can hear me? Great. Good morning. We're on the record in case number 2020-00370, electronic application of Fleming Solar LLC for a certificate of construction for an approximately 80 megawatt merchant electric solar generating facility in Fleming County, Kentucky, pursuant to KRS 278-700 and 807 KR 5110. My name is Kent Chandler. I'm chairman of the Kentucky Public Service Commission and also serve as chairman for the Kentucky State Board on Electric Generation and Transmission Siting, and I will be presiding over the hearing today. Joining me via video conferencing are the other siting board members. They are Amy Cubbage, Vice Chair of the Kentucky Public Service Commission, Marianne Butler, Commissioner of the Kentucky Public Service Commission, John Lyons, Deputy Secretary of the Energy and Environment Cabinet, serving as proxy for Secretary Rebecca Goodman, Charlie Rowland, Executive Advisor with the Cabinet for Economic Development, serving as proxy for Interim Secretary Larry Hayes. Also on this siting board, but not joining us right now, our Fleming County Judge Executive Larry Foxworthy and Community Representative John Price. At this time, I would ask that you please mute your cell phones or turn them to silent. Because of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, we're also having to do this hearing via video conferencing. So I'd offer the following other requests: that you mute your microphone if you're not speaking, that if attorneys, when interjecting, state your name for the record so it's clear. If you use a phone for audio and a computer for video, I ask that you turn the computer audio off. We also ask that you use wired headphones or earbuds. Wired is better for sound quality, but also to ensure that the wireless devices don't lose their battery. Also, if you're using a laptop, we ask that you keep your charger nearby in case your battery runs low. And finally, most importantly, please alert the siting board if you are experiencing technology failure that prevents your participation at any time during today's hearing. Attorneys should contact staff at the previously provided contact information. The purpose of today's hearing is to take evidence on Fleming Solar's application for a certificate of construction for an 80 megawatt merchant electric generating solar facility located to be in Fleming County. At this time, we'll ask for the entry of appearance of counsel, and we just ask if at this time counsel go ahead and identify the witnesses that they'll have with them today. For the applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kenneth Gish from K&L Gates, representing Solar LLC, the applicant in this case. And we have, as identified Mr. Mance, 3 witnesses in our primary case that we will call Dominic Salinas, who's the Senior Development Manager for Core Solar and has been the Senior Development Manager for this project. Core Solar is the parent company of Fleming Solar LLC. Audrey Bajorquez, who is the Asset Development Director for Core Solar and has also worked on this project. And then Randall Jenks, who's the Vice President of Engineering and Project Execution for Core Solar and has been instrumental in working on the construction and related site layout and design information for this project. We also have a series of witnesses that could be available if the board is interested in delving into the details of any of the studies that they particularly prepared. And those have been identified to Mr. Mance. They are all available on this call as well.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gish. And for staff?
Cornelius Mance.
And are there any, first, Mr. Gish, I just want to confirm that notice of this public hearing or this evidentiary hearing has been filed into the evidence of public notice has been filed into the record. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And are there any outstanding motions other than the applicant's outstanding motion for a deviation filed with its application?
No, Mr. Chairman. We received the order and the motion for confidential treatment on Monday.
Okay. I think as part, Mr. Gish, I don't know whether or not you provided as part of the notice what the exact wording was, but we did indicate on our website that those interested in providing public comment may do so at the outset of today's hearing, as long as they register ahead of time. We have had a number of people register in order to provide public comments, and so we'll do that now. Anyone that may be watching this live and was unable to provide to timely request to provide public comment before today's hearing can certainly do so in writing. The instructions to do so are located on the Public Service Commission website at psc.ky.gov. We just ask that written comments on this matter include the commenter's name, address, and the case number, which in this matter is 2020-00370. At this time, we'll begin to take public comments. I think that those folks waiting to provide public comments can hear me, so I'll go ahead and give I guess a brief instruction ahead of comments. The role and obligation of the siting board is to review applications and grant certificates, if approved, for the construction of electric generating facilities greater than 10 megawatts and the transmission lines proposed by entities not regulated by the Public Service Commission. We understand in any case proceeding proposing the construction of such a project that there may be strong feelings and opinions. We ask that as you provide comments today that you are respectful and mindful of the time limit for each speaker. We are here to listen. The applicant is not presenting during this. The applicant is not providing a presentation during the public comments, only during the evidentiary hearing. The siting board is here to listen. The applicant has their opportunity to make the case during the pendency of this matter. This initial opportunity, or this beginning of this hearing, is an opportunity for members of the community in which the solar project is proposed to be built to state their positions, concerns, and provide the siting board comments for its consideration. During today's comment session, the siting board will not be answering questions. We're here to merely listen. The siting board is the fact finder and decision maker in this case, and as such, the board members are unable to comment or speak to the process or substance of the pending application. Nevertheless, questions you raise during your comments may well be of assistance to the siting board and its staff in adjudicating this matter. If you have questions for the applicant, you can raise them during your comments with the anticipation that the applicant may later convey an appropriate answer outside of this public meeting. If you do have questions about process or where to find documents regarding this case, you can either contact the company or you can contact the Kentucky Public Service Commission, who staffs the Kentucky Siting Board, at the following number: 502-564-3940. Additional information can be found at the Kentucky Public Service Commission website under case number 2020-00370. Given the number of people who have requested to provide comments today, we'll be limiting the length of comments to 5 minutes. I'll ask each person, we have a list of names here of people who have signed up ahead of time. I'll ask you to provide your name, your address, and then I will give you 5 minutes in order to provide your comments. When you have 1 minute remaining, I'll let you know. The first person who has signed up for public comments on this matter is Chuck Marshall.
Yes. Here.
All right, can you hear me, Mr. Marshall?
Yes.
Great.
Sure am.
Yeah, please provide your name, address, and then you'll have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity this morning. I'm Chuck Marshall, Flemingsburg, Kentucky, 4565 Maysville Road. I'm involved in real estate, brokerage, auctioneer, also landowner, farmer. Excuse me, and been a lifelong resident of Fleming County, served in the capacity of the property valuation administrator for 13 years in Fleming County. I really think that this project is something of the future, but it's present, and I think we need to go forward with it. With the renewable fuels, they're going to be it is the future, and I think it would be an asset to our county. It would, in my opinion, it would increase farmland values, and also it could help other land values also. So I think it would be a big asset to the county. Hopefully that the county will receive some kind of a windfall. I know that's up in the air through leasehold or whatever taxation it may be coming down coming after the installment of these. The biggest opposition that I've heard is the appearance of these panels, and I understand some people it may be offensive to them, but economically and I really think it would be a good thing for Fleming County.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Marshall.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
The second person that signed up to speak today is William Dale Horde.
Yes, I'm here.
All right, Mr. Horde. I'll restart the clock. Just please introduce yourself with your name, your address, and you'll have 5 minutes to provide your comments.
Yes, sir. This is William Dale Horde. I'm in Flemingsburg, Kentucky, 2247 Helena Road. I am a landowner here, hopefully with this project. I really think in some of our public meetings that we've had in the county, everyone's comments are what's in it for me. That's the main thing I've heard. And from what I hear at all the flats and everything, that as far as aesthetic views and stuff will be hidden, or won't even see them hardly at all. And I know I will benefit from it. And farming's not in a great place right now. And I think this, I've been farming here since '71 in this area. And farmed most of this land that is in this project. And I think the old land's been farmed hard. It's rolling land. It needs a rest, and it will be there for the future of whoever decides to farm. I know my years on this earth are getting less and less, and I think we need to look for the future for our young people. And hopefully things will be better for them. And the energy of this valley we live in is a cancer-ridden valley because of our coal-powered plants. And I think we need to do away with our coal-powered plants and look for something better. And I know it's out there. It's just like we just happened the other day down in Glendale. They're putting in that plant down there, which this year got started, I guess, and I think that's a great thing for that area, and that's a farming area too. And it's going to be self-contained and going to have solar panels, and I think that's our future. Use the sun and preserve our climate, and it'd be a benefit for everyone in the long run. It'll have a trickle-down effect, and everyone will benefit from sometime in the future. And it's going to increase our tax revenue for our county, and it stimulizes, and everything will be better for everyone. And that's basically all I had to say. I thank you for this opportunity to talk.
Thank you, Mr. Horde.
Thank you very much.
The next person that we have signed up to speak is Andrew Wood. Mr. Wood, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Please state your name, address, and then you'll have 5 minutes to provide your comments.
Terrific, thanks. My name is Andrew Wood. My address is 1213 Old Jersey Ridge Road in Maysville, Kentucky. Although that's my home address, the farm address is on Convict Pike in Fleming County, and I am a participant or a proposed participant in the solar project that we're talking about. And I'd like to thank the PSC for giving us an opportunity to make comments, to make short comments Obviously, we could talk for 3 hours on this. There's so much to talk about, but I'll keep mine short. And I'll just tell a little bit of my story, how I chose to get associated with Core Solar, and then testimony for Core Solar and that they keep their promises. After 2008 financial crisis, I became convinced that the financial apocalypse was upon us, and I decided to buy farmland as a hedge against inflation, which never really materialized. But at any rate, I was convinced that I would always have income from the crops from the farm. At the time that I bought the farm, commodities were selling for a super premium. You couldn't lose buying a farm and then raising crops. Well, it turned out that the next 7 years were not so good. It was a real struggle. I found out that farming was really just legalized gambling. There were so many factors beyond your control regarding output, regarding prices for your crops. It turned into poor economics. Hardly enough to make the bank payment, and that's after a sizable down payment. In the middle of this, I had a friend tell me, it was too late, but he said, Andrew, if you want to be a successful farmer, you only need 3 things: free land, free equipment, and free cattle. And if you have those things, you're going to be a very successful farmer. Well, my luck got worse. There were windstorms, broken pipes, renters trashing the houses that were on there, rats. Finally, a windstorm blew over several large trees and blew over a chimney in the big house. And I called my realtor who sold me the farm, and I said, you got me into this mess. I want you to sell it. Get rid of it. And he said, I'm out of town. When I come back, we'll sign you up. The next day, I got a letter from a different solar company telling me that this property was perfect for solar development. It was an answer to a prayer. I did my homework. I called friends. All the recommendations that I heard was that Core Solar out of Austin, Texas was the company to go with. I made contact with the owner, Greg Nelson. They've been terrific. I called people that they had developed solar farms on. They were all spoke glowingly of them. They kept their promises. And my experience is that they do. I have friends that are adjacent to this project, friends that I didn't want to alienate. They're not crazy about the change of scenery, but whenever I've asked Core to follow through and to make good with them, they have. They've bent over backwards to accommodate setbacks and other accommodations, and I just can't speak highly enough of Core. I'll only just briefly address some of the counter arguments that I've heard against solar, and that, number one is that it takes up prime farmland, but the federal government, basically has determined we have too much prime farmland, and they have a conservation reserve program that pays farmers not to farm. So far, I think 25 million acres is in this program, and to do the quick math, I believe that's an area the size of the entire state of Kentucky. And last year, they added 4 million more acres. The economics, we're doing so good at farming that we've basically priced ourselves out of a living, and so they're having to take farmland off the market. Not my decision, but this is a great way for farmers to make use of this land without putting all the chemicals on it. I'm thrilled to participate. Hope the PSC will allow me to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Last person we have signed up to provide public comments is David Barnett. Mr. Barnett, can you hear me?
Yes, are you able to hear me?
We can. If you could, please provide your name, address, and you'll have 5 minutes, and I'll notify you when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. My name is David Barnett. My home address is 1815 Cherry Grove Road in Fleming, Kentucky. I'm the pastor at New Creation Praise and Worship Center, which happens to be the neighbor of the proposed project. The comments that I will make should not be considered the position of the congregation, but rather are the comments of my own after having investigated the proposal. I became aware of the project when information was taped to the church door by someone who was concerned about the project, and I began to listen to these concerns and to research CORE and its proposal. Initially, I was concerned about a number of issues, including changing the view, possible noise pollution, and detriment on property values, and what would happen to the land if the system became non-profitable and they abandoned the project. I met with Kyle Cochran and other members of the CORE team to gather more information, found them to be straightforward, responded quickly to my inquiries, and provided additional information when requested. I also did my own research to ensure that what I was receiving was unbiased. Subsequently, CORE asked to use the church parking lot for a sort of a community meeting whereby neighbors could provide input, ask questions, and we were able to see the drawings of the proposals. It was at this meeting that most of my concerns about the project were minimized. First of all, I tried to imagine myself as a neighbor who lived there 24/7. As the church, we're not there all the time, so any site or change in the site wasn't really that much of a concern. So when I saw the proposal and Kyle and I looked at the land, given the geography of the land and the rolling hills, little if any of the solar panels would be seen, at least from the church and the church's parking lot. Again, that was a major concern of mine. Of course, some of the concerns about noise pollution have been unfounded. The impact on property values, I still am not convinced one way or the other whether that would be positive or negatively impacted, because there is a lot of information there. I have found the process to be open. Anytime I had a question, they would respond, the CORE reacted very, very quickly and very straightforwardly. The process has been very transparent, and the CORE folks have recognized that people have different feelings and different attitudes and thoughts about the proposal. And so they have entertained both positive and negative comments in a professional and forthright manner. As many of the other speakers have said, the forward-thinking aspect of the project is one that is certainly appreciated and appealing, but perhaps more than that, I think it is the professional manner in which CORE has responded and reacted to this entire process. And as also a lifelong member, resident of Fleming County, is one that I want my children and grandchildren to be able to enjoy the place in which we live. That's all comments I have. Certainly entertain any questions.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Barnett. So those are all the public comments that we had that have signed up to provide public comments today. Again, anybody that's watching live or after the fact, up until the submission of this case, public comments can be filed with the Public Service Commission through the Public Service Commission website or with information that is on the Public Service Commission website. We just ask that you provide your name, your address, and the case number, which in this matter is 2020-00370. Mr. Mance, before we get ready for the presentation of evidence, you have anything we need to address?
No, sir.
Mr. Gish, anything we need to address before the applicant's presentation of evidence?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. All right, if you're prepared, Mr. Gish, you may call your first witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Fleming Solar will call its first witness, Dominic Salinas.
Okay. Mr. Salinas, I ask that you turn on your audio and please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate under the penalty of perjury?
I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Dominic Salinas, 300 South Lamar Boulevard, Austin, Texas.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Gish, before you ask, I assume you'll have some introduction or direct examination. I just ask that at some point before tendering for cross-examination that you ask all of your witnesses to identify the documents that they have in front of them, similar as we would if somebody walked up to the witness stand with a big old pile of papers. We'd all be wondering what they are. So I'd appreciate that.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Salinas, can you state your job title, your employer and job title for the record?
Yes, Senior Development Manager for Fort Solar.
And Mr. Salinas, were you involved in the preparation of the application materials for this application?
Yes, I was.
And were you involved in the response to data requests from both the board staff and the board's consultant, Harvey Economics?
Yes.
And do you have any corrections or clarifications for either the application materials or your responses to the data requests?
I do not.
And can you describe briefly your role in the preparation or your role in the development of this project?
Sure. So, project lead, I've been with this project since the beginning, since meeting with the landowners, doing the initial landowner outreach, the real estate work, and taking it through the early stage development. And then with regard to the application, was managing the team, Ms. Borges, Mr. Jenks, in organizing the site assessment report and the other application materials, as well as the responses to the data requests.
Great. And can you describe the materials that you have on hand?
Yes, I have both data requests from the siting board staff 1 and 2. I have the data request from Harvey Economics. I have the Harvey Economics response to our SAR. I have a layout copy, of our most recent layout. That's just a guide with some pertinent facts from our SAR on our project in front of me.
With those, Mr. Chairman, I tender Mr. Salinas for questioning.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gish. Mr. Mance, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. Mr. Salinas, if you could refer to the Fleming Solar responses to the board consultant report, specifically the responses to recommendation A3 regarding the site development plan. In the response, Fleming advises that studies submitted as part of the application were based on potential project footprint located within the project boundary, and the potential project footprint represents the first extent of generating equipment will be located in the project's final design within the project boundary. Fleming then requests changes to the layout within the potential project footprint should not be considered material changes in the project resulting in changes to impacts of adjoining neighbors. Let me ask first, when do you anticipate the site layout will be finalized?
Sure. So I think that we will continue to do a number of iterations on the layout. We have not yet contracted with an EPC group. We've been waiting to do that until after getting the permit in place with the siting board. So I anticipate maybe 3 to 4 months for us to have a final layout. I would say that the layout that was included in the application did include some additional information that we received on the title side, as well as from our Alta survey. So we did take into account the easements that we know exist as of today. But we will be kind of perfecting our project layout as we go forward here with final design.
Okay. When asking that the changes to the layout within the project footprint not be considered material, are you referring to changes in the location of project components that still comply within setback requirements, when referring to changes within the project footprint in that response?
Yes, sir.
When requesting that changes in the layout within a potential project footprint should not be considered material changes, do you consider only the material, do you consider the only material change to be a violation of setback requirements?
Can you repeat the question?
When you refer to, as you just said, your reference to potential changes within the potential project footprint is what you desire to be deemed immaterial to the siting board. And you said that is reference to changes that would comply with the setback requirements within the project footprint. What I'm asking is the only material change, the only thing you consider to be a material change to be if you were to have a violation of the setback requirements within the project footprint?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What would you define, or what would you consider to be an actual material change, if you were still even if you were still in compliance with the setback requirement? Is there anything you could anticipate being a material change?
I cannot at this time.
Okay.
Let me ask this question, Mr. Salinas. If
Sir.
This ridiculous hypothetical I'm about to throw out came up yesterday, what if, which they've done in some places, instead of the racking panels being 4 to 6 feet off the ground, Core Solar decides to instead have the racking panels 14 feet off the ground and co-locate cattle grazing on the 800 acres. Would Core Solar deem that to be a material change?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mr. Rance.
All right, thank you. In referring to Fleming Solar's response to the siting board's first request for information, item 6A, in its response, Fleming Solar explains that it has confirmed the presence of a 12-inch water main line by speaking with the Public Works Director of Flemingsburg Water, but that he and the maps available were unable to provide you with the exact location of the water main line. Have you been able to obtain an updated site map confirming the location of the 12-inch water main? And have you been able to have Flemingsburg Water's easement clearly identified?
No, sir, not with regard to this particular easement. Not yet.
Do you have an anticipation of when you will be able to obtain that information?
Sure, so we have the final Alta survey that we did not pick that up. So we are going to address that in the next couple of months, most likely. And we'll be reaching out to the Fleming Water Association to make sure that we know where that is. All we would need to know as we move into the later stages of this project, we know that we're going to have to get a crossing agreement for that particular easement. So that is one of the development items outstanding that we need to do.
Thank you. My next question was actually regarding the Alta survey and the exact thing you just mentioned, so I'll ask the last part of the question. Can you confirm that Fleming Solar will be able to provide the siting board even after, if grant the CPCN will provide the siting board with the Fleming County Water Association easement, as well as copies of the crossing agreements referenced when you obtain those?
Yes, sir.
Refer to the Fleming Solar response to board's consultant report, the response to recommendation A, recommendation A5. Fleming advises that it supports the concept of ensuring final construction schedule and workforce estimates do not result in negative impacts or exceed those identified in the site assessment report, but requests that Fleming Solar's potential obligation to support the siting board's effect provides essentially be impacts and mitigation requirements be limited to changes in the construction schedule or workforce estimates that result in traffic impacts that are of a higher magnitude than those identified in the site assessment report. When speaking of the construction schedule, are you referring purely to the days of the week and times during which you'll be allowed to work construction? Or are you referring to the expected length of the project's construction, of the entire length of the project?
I'd like to defer details regarding the construction schedule to Randy Jenks, our VP of Project Execution and Engineering.
I'll move on to compatibility and scenic surroundings and the questions regarding that. Referring to Fleming Solar's responses to the board consultant report, specifically responses to recommendation B3 regarding compatibility with scenic surroundings, Fleming's requests that it should be obligated by, requests that should it be obligated by a mitigation measure to work with homeowners and business owners to address concerns related to visual impact on the project and on its neighbors, that it be allowed to do pursuant to the complaint resolution program provided to the commission in the site assessment report. Have there been any concerns from neighbors to this stage of the development?
Yes, sir.
And has Fleming Solar been complying with the complaint resolution program in addressing their concerns?
We have reached out directly to people that have expressed concerns in our 2 statutory public meetings, as well as in our community event. They were not pursuant to the exact procedures set forth in the complaint resolution program. We plan to put that program into place definitely before construction, and it'll be in place for construction operation. But our primary method of responding to those concerns has been just to reach out directly to the neighbors, either via email or phone, and speak on a one-on-one basis, either in person or over the phone with those people.
All right. Please refer to the responses to the board consultant report, specifically response to recommendation B4 regarding compatibility with scenic surroundings. In that response, Fleming states it supports the consultant recommendation that Fleming provide visual buffer between project infrastructure and residents of the other occupied structures, with a line of sight to the facility to the satisfaction of the affected property owners. However, Fleming requests that the obligation be limited to properties within 300 feet, that Fleming be required to use best efforts to address those concerns. It is my understanding that there are only 2 properties within 300 feet. Is that your understanding?
Yes, sir. Our setbacks are at least 300 feet from the property boundaries of non-participating residents.
Okay. And
Mr. Mayor, may I ask just a quick question of the witness to make sure he has this document handy? Mr. Salinas, do you have the Fleming Solar's response to the consultant's report handy?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. It's a lot harder to do this when we can see if they've got it in front of them. My apologies.
it is also my understanding that there's an additional 33 residents within 600 feet and within view of the project. Can you confirm that is correct as well?
I would have to confirm with the SAR that exact number, but if it's stating the SAR, then yes, that's correct.
Okay.
It hasn't changed.
Is there a specific reason that Fleming should not be obligated to address any of these neighbor concerns within reason and with best efforts under the complaint resolution program? Since they are still within the site view of the project?
I think I will defer the details of the visual assessment to Audrey Bajorquez, who worked on that with Jeff Jackson at GAI.
If you could please refer to Fleming Solar responses to the board's consultant report, specifically recommendations, response to the recommendation B9 regarding anti-glare panels and the minimization of glare. Fleming Solar indicated that glare hazard study provided in the application identified no potential glare from the project. Could you, to clarify, did you mean Fleming Solar has determined there would be no red glare, or that there is no glare whatsoever?
No glare whatsoever.
Okay. Referring to solar responses to the same, once again, still to B9, Fleming Solar indicated that if it has any issues or complaints regarding glare impacts from any residents, that experience verifiable red glare for more than 60 minutes in a year pursuant to the complaint resolution program, that it would then address it with vegetative screening to mitigate any issue verified. In reviewing this response, it could be read that the glare will have to be, that the response to the glare will be delayed, that the complaint resolution program will not be initiated until after you can confirm that there have been 60 minutes for a year of red glare. I just want to confirm that if there are complaints, that it will not require confirmation before the actual complaint resolution program is instituted, that confirmation is part of the complaint resolution program and not a prerequisite. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. In referring to Fleming Solar responses to the Board Solar report and your response to recommendation B10, Fleming Solar stated it intends to coordinate with the developers of another project, specifically AEUG Fleming, to minimize impacts of the project construction on non-participating landowners. Does Fleming have prior examples in which it is coordinated with neighboring solar projects?
None that I can think of right now.
Then what is your understanding of how you will proceed with this coordination with AEUG Fleming?
Sure. I think just to state that we are and have been in contact with AEUG. The lead developer there, Adam Stratton, they've actually been in our office here in Austin where we spoke on our projects and a high level of where they are in the process. We feel that any overlap is highly unlikely given where we are in the PJM interconnection process. We just do not have the final construction schedule, either ours or we have not seen theirs. But we do, through construction, we do intend to coordinate with further meetings, further communication with Adam and their team, taking into account the potential for impacts here, especially along 5F9.
Has Fleming Solar had any communication or contact with non-participating property owners to specifically discuss view shed and noise impacts, both during construction and operations?
Yes, sir, that has been part of when we've been able to get in contact on a one-on-one basis, either in person or over the phone. That's been part of most of those discussions, going over the noise impacts. Noise and visual, I would say, would be the two big components of their concern, including potential property value impact. So I would say yes, in all of those conversations, that issue came up and we were able to talk through it.
Could you generally describe Core Solar's business philosophy as it relates to community outreach and how Core Solar interacts with the community where it develops solar facilities?
Sure, I would say that Core Solar in general strives to be a good partner in the communities where we are developing. My standpoint, we do not use land agents, real estate agents, and I think you can hear it in the testimony where, we've developed these relationships with the landowners over years. So we make a point of being in the community early, and as we hope to be a partner in the community. And we have in our past projects, as Andrew Wood mentioned, we have where we've developed projects, we have the reputation of being a good partner, and that is shown through a lot of our landowner recommendations, as well as just our recommendations in the general marketplace.
Thank you. And could you provide examples of how Core Solar has worked with a nearby non-participating landowner to address their concern with respect to noise and visual impacts created by a Core Solar facility? Just an example that you're aware of in the past?
Sure, I would say the best example was our coordination with New Creation, the church. David, the pastor, spoke earlier. We met with him and we went over the service schedule, the weekend service schedule, particularly on Sundays. We were discussing driving activity and what that entails during construction. And from that meeting, in-person meeting there in Flemingburg with David, we came back with an agreement that we would not do any construction prior to noon on Sundays because we knew that the services were prior to noon every Sunday. So I think that's a good example.
Regarding, if you could refer to Fleming Solar responses to the consultant report, response to recommendation D2, Fleming Solar supports the recommendation to mitigate noise levels for nearby residents as needed, but asks that it be required to only take commercially reasonable steps to mitigate any noise effects that any mitigation measure and that any mitigation measure reference 120 decibels at the property boundary as the noise level that requires mitigation. How did Fleming determine 120 decibels as the level at which it believes mitigation should be required?
Sure. So from the SAR, we learned that about 120 decibels is what the pile driving noise would be at the source. That's where we got that number. And then taking into account the 85 decibels that pile driving would cause, that noise level at our setbacks, we thought that 120 decibels was a good guideline there for this response.
And could you provide an explanation and include any examples you're aware of what Fleming Solar believes are commercially reasonable steps to mitigate any noise effects?
Sure, I would say that during construction, we have reached out to a vendor regarding the semi-truck whole noise canvas reduction measure. Initially, we were talking to our EPC folks, and they were saying that mitigation of pile driving activity during construction was not would not be effective. But we continue to research that, and we have found vendors where I think it would be at this point commercially reasonable to use those measures, either a sound blanket along the fence line or the semi canvas to mitigate the pile driving noise during construction.
All right, thank you. If you could refer to your responses to the consultant report, consultant's first request for information, items 1F, 1B. Fleming Solar advises that no heavy construction activities. I apologize. This is the exact question I had in reference to the agreement you came to with the pastor. So you've already answered that question. I apologize. Referring to the Fleming Solar responses to consultant report in responses to recommendation D5, you state that you agree with the recommendation with the current recommendations previously established in other cases that working hours be from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Saturday. Is Fleming still committed to maintaining those working hours?
Yes, sir.
If you refer to the consultant responses to the first request for information from the consultant, specifically response to B1, Fleming Solar confirms that that it will develop a formal decommissioning plan and that it will be completed prior to posting the decommissioning bond. Is Fleming still committed to developing a formal decommissioning plan and providing that to the siting board?
Yes, sir.
When do you anticipate developing that formal decommissioning plan?
The exact timing of that, I'd say, I defer to Randy Jenks. Mr. Jenks is going to be the one leading that effort.
All right. And is Fleming Solar committed to posting a decommissioning bond, a bond associated with decommissioning?
Yes, sir.
And at what point would that decommissioning bond be posted?
Prior to operations.
Prior to operation. I have no further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Deputy Secretary Lyons, do you have any questions?
Just one, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Salinas. I noticed in your application there was a presentation that referenced working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife and doing stream and wetland delineation studies. What is the status of those at this point?
Sure. So we've received the habitat study back, and there were general recommendations in that study that we followed. And I think details of that study we could provide if needed later, but we have received it.
That would be great if you could submit that. Are there jurisdictional waters of the U.S. and waters of the Commonwealth on site?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Also, I saw a mention to phase 1 assessment. Is that also being done as well?
It's completed.
Has that been submitted?
No, not yet.
We would like to see that as well. Thank you, Chairman. No more.
Mr. Mance, we can provide those as a response to the post-hearing
Yes,
data request if that's
Mr.
the most convenient way to
Mr.
do
Gish,
that.
yeah, Mr. Gish, any questions that we have that seek additional information, we'll discuss them at the end of the hearing, but we'll be providing those in written form on a date certain, and then we'll find a date in which those need to be responded to.
Yeah, thanks, sir.
Yep. Mr. Rowland?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair Cubbage?
Just one, because Deputy Secretary hit my others. Good morning, Mr. Salinas. Thank you for being here. Do you have a purchaser for this power yet?
Do not. We are in active negotiations with a number of potential corporate buyers in this area.
That's all I've got. Thanks.
Commissioner Butler?
No questions at this time.
Mr. Salinas, I have a few questions. If you don't understand them, please just tell me as much. Or Mr. Gish will interject and tell me that they're incoherent. Or if you'd like to push them onto somebody else, let me know. I'd like to go back to the question that I asked you. I interjected here that Mr. Mance was asking you about, material changes. And if you have that response to the consultant's report in front of you, is that correct?
Yes, I need to,
On page, there are general responses, but then there are the specific responses to identified mitigation recommendations made by the consultant. One of those is mitigation recommendation A3. And that narrative goes from page 8 to page 9 on that document. And the mitigation recommendation is related to the deviation in the boundaries, any deviation in the boundaries or the site development plan. So, as I understand it, the site development plan is a current plan, but it's not necessarily set in stone. Is that correct?
yes, sir.
Okay, and it's subject to change based off of preferences, but also, at least from the developer's perspective, requirements. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes, it is. As additional information has come in, for example, the wetland delineation with the U.S. Army Corps, that has caused some changes in our layout to avoid those issues.
Okay, and I know you're aware, you speak to it in data request responses today during your testimony that the siting board has certain statutory items that are listed in the statute that we look for, right? Visual issues, noise, environmental, fugitive dust, impact on economics, roads, things like that, correct?
Sir.
Okay, so we have a situation, and you're not alone, Mr. Salinas. We have 28 of these. The saying goes that people can go to 0 to 100 real fast. We've gone from 0 to 28 real fast. We have a lot of these, and everybody wants a permit. Everybody wants a certificate to build them, but they want a maximum flexibility in order to do so following the receipt of the certificate. And I can appreciate why you would want that for the reasons that we discussed a second ago. My question is this: am I supposed to read the response on 8 and going on to 9 as being that? Well, I'll just read the recommendation and ask the question then, or the response. Starting at page 9, the first sentence begins with, "as noted in the application." Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
All right, so tell me if you disagree with what it says, or what I read here that says, "As noted in the application, the potential project footprint represents the furthest extent that generating equipment will be located in the project's final design within the project boundary, and changes to the layout within the potential project footprint should not be considered material changes in the project resulting in changes to impacts for adjoining neighbors. So that's the first thing. Let's just remember that. So changes, as long as the proposal here is changes, as long as they're within the boundary, the request is that they not be considered material as long as they stay within the boundary. And the second part, Fleming Solar requests that should Harvey Economics' recommendation become a mitigation condition for the Fleming Solar project, this condition be limited to those changes in the project's design that are, one, that's my addition, but the first part is outside of the potential project footprint, and two, result in increased noise or visual impacts. So my first question is, should we read this as being the comment to the response to the recommendation for this second part is that if changes are made that result in increased noise or visual impacts, but are still inside the potential project footprint, is it your all's recommendation that those not be considered material and subject to the siting board's review?
No, sir. We just anticipate through the results set forth in our SAR, we believe at this point that we've created a potential project footprint with setbacks that mitigate noise and visual impacts that would occur within the potential project footprint.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that. I guess what my question is you've proposed a site layout that includes setbacks, but also vegetation buffers to minimize against noise and visual issues, correct? And if panels are moved or clustered or raised or lowered in accordance differently than what's proposed, if the vegetative buffers or other mitigation measures that are required in this case stay the same, that could then change the visual or noise implications of the site, right?
Yes.
Okay. And so I guess I would ask, in the event there are things that are moved under your proposal, things that are moved within the project boundaries, but all the other plans stay the same, the vegetative buffering, the setbacks, is it your all's plan to change those as well in order to mitigate any impacts that are created by the site layout, the change in the site layout?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I guess that just raises, and this is kind of a rhetorical question maybe, but then how do we, right now we have a plan that we can look at where the panels are going to be. We're able to take a site visit. We understand, there's a proposal, we'll build the trees, they'll be a certain height at this time, they'll grow to this level, they'll be, planted in this way. How will we know whether or not those mitigation measures, right, that vegetative buffering, for instance, actually mitigates the noise and sound impacts of those changes?
Sure. I think that at this point, we do not anticipate moving the panels or other components in such a way that would increase the noise, visual impacts with our given setback.
Okay. That's helpful. Are you familiar with the site layout, the proposed site layout?
Yes.
Okay. There's a map provided, and I was hoping maybe you'd be able to speak to it. There was a map provided in Exhibit A to the site assessment report, I believe, on page 24. And I think it's the first map. Let me see here. And it's PDF, I think it's PDF pagination 24. Let me see what the document is. It's it's within the application documents. And it's Exhibit A to it. There are two maps, one on PDF pagination 23 and one on PDF pagination 24. Would you have those available to look at?
I do not have our original application. I can pull it up. I
Yeah,
don't have it up right
Mr.
now.
Gish, do you by any
Please have
chance have that?
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused as to what we're,
That's okay.
what it is we're looking for. I apologize, Mr. Chairman. You want Exhibit A to the application materials?
Yeah,
Is
so
that what we're
there's,
looking for?
yeah, there's a document that's application materials Exhibit A through H.
Yeah. Let me,
Mr. Chairman.
yeah,
You have that?
yeah.
Okay, so Mr. Salinas, on PDF pagination 23, there's a map that shows the project area, a 2,000-foot buffer, and a 2-mile buffer. Do you see that? On PDF pagination 23?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then on PDF pagination 24, there's a map that shows it's an aerial map that shows the project boundary. I'm just looking at the legend here. The project boundary, security fences, utility substation security fences, and the, quote, potential project footprint. Do you see that map?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Gish, do you have that in front of you? I hate to ask a question of your witness without you knowing what I'm asking about.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. I do have it in front of me.
Okay, great. So, Mr. Salinas, there's I'm looking at the map here, and there's effectively two discrete areas of the project, right? There's the primary area in the middle, and then there's the upper right-hand corner. I assume this is, that's the northwest portion, but I can't, yes. The northeast portion, excuse me, of the area. Do you see that northeast portion, that separate portion of the project?
Yes.
Okay. In the top right-hand corner, the northeast portion of that northeast portion of the project, and this is what a gentleman yesterday described this as being a lollipop, that there's an area of the proposed, I think it's the potential project footprint that goes, well, it effectively forms the shape of, as the gentleman said yesterday, a lollipop. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. What is that potential footprint going around?
There is an existing farm held by a participating landowner, Amanda Mitchell. And we just have a temporary construction easement for utilization of the driveway there. So we're avoiding that barn because it's her property.
Okay, so let's take a step back. So the property that is outside of the proposed project boundary in that area is just land that's not under Fleming Solar's control. Is that correct?
That, in addition, looking back at the layout, that is where another water easement came up in our Alta survey going diagonally. So we needed to avoid that as well.
Here's why I asked the question. To the discussion we had earlier, the yellow is the project boundary. And as I understand it, the potential project footprint. I want to get my legend terms correct. The potential project footprint. And that's 725 acres. The project boundary is 830 acres. So I want to go back to what you were saying earlier. I want to get the quote right too. That as noted in the application, the potential project footprint represents the furthest extent that generating equipment will be located to the project's final design within the project boundary, and changes to the layout within the potential project footprint should not be considered material changes. So what I want to make sure of in like these unique instances, especially where the, sort of the layout is odd, that your response, the company's response to the mitigation proposal is that moving equipment, generating equipment, all right, generating may be wrong, but let's just say moving panels, string inverters, centrals inverters, substation equipment, whatever it may be, right? That your proposal is, as long as it's within the yellow line on this map, with the yellow areas, that it should not be considered to be material?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. And then, and that proposal would still maintain the, well, let me take a step back. Is there any commitment that you're aware of in the record in which the security fence will be maintained a separate distance back from the proposed project footprint?
No, there is not.
Okay. Is there a distance required for a setback from the the project boundary?
That is where we've integrated the 300, at least 300 feet from the property boundaries of non-participating residents.
Okay. And so otherwise, where you don't have a concern about, I think, roads and non-participating homes, or property boundaries, non-participating property boundaries, otherwise the only setback, as it may be called, that that would apply to the fence in relation to the project boundary or from facilities would be any of those required by NESC?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I have one last question about the noise and traffic studies report, and in particular the proposed setbacks and the proposed distances to residences. Would you have any information on those, or be able to speak to them at all?
Yes, I do. I would defer any detailed questions to Mrs. Borges regarding those studies.
Okay, so I'm on page 2 of that document. That document is, I think, Applications Material Exhibit I. Appendix C is the noise and traffic study. Do you have that available to you?
Ms. Borges is bringing it up now. She has the application materials.
Okay. On page 2 of that document, let me know when you're there.
Yes, I'm there.
Okay, so it provides a couple of distances there of proposed setbacks for operating equipment. For substation transformer, 300 feet from the project boundary. Inverters, 300 feet from the project boundary adjacent to non-participating parcels with nearby residences. 150 feet from the project boundary adjacent to non-participating parcels without nearby residences. All other equipment, 300 feet from the project boundary adjacent to non-participating parcels with nearby residences. 50 feet from the project boundary adjacent to non-participating parcels without nearby residences, and then 50 feet from adjacent roads. Do you see that? All right, so what I want to make sure I understand these distances, because I think you all have been very consistent between project boundary, proposed project footprint, and things like, I just want to make sure I understand. So 300 feet from the project boundary for a transformer, right? That's that's the red line, or the maroon line. I'm sorry if anybody following this is colorblind. The maroon line around the edge of the entire map we just looked at, right?
That's right.
Okay. And none of these distances relate to the proposed project footprint, which is like the 700 plus acres, correct?
That's correct.
They all relate to the project boundary, which is the 800 plus acres, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So the substation, 300 feet from the project boundary. And remind me, is it the project boundary or the proposed project footprint that is already 300 feet away from participating homeowners or non-participating residences?
I'd like to defer this to Ms. Borges if we can. He's actually the one who came up with the concept of the proposed project footprint and manage that process.
Okay, and which witness is that?
Ms. Borges.
And Mr. Gish, you plan on calling her as a witness, is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, next.
Okay. And then on the next page, there's a table that talks about the distance to the nearest inverters. And the nearest inverter that I can find to a residence, participating, non-participating, this table doesn't make a distinction necessarily, is residence 21, which it says is 736 feet from the nearest residence. Do you see that?
Yes, yes I do.
Okay. But then do you see that the next table is distance to potential project footprint?
Yes.
And that is 362 feet, right?
Correct.
Okay. But the requested setbacks are from distances for the project boundary, correct?
Yes.
And the request in response to the mitigation, the response to the mitigation recommendation that we just discussed was a proposal that as long as the operating equipment is moved within the project boundary, it not be deemed material. Is that correct?
Within the project footprint.
Only the project footprint. Okay.
Yes.
All right. I will reserve the remainder of my questions until later, but I'm going to take liberty again today and just make a statement. It's very difficult to understand exactly how far away things are being proposed to be in terms of what position the company is taking as its proposal to maintain operating equipment from residences and areas of edges of property versus the actual residence itself. So I'll keep the rest of my questions for the next witness. Mr. Gish, do you have any redirect that you would like to ask?
No, Mr. Chandler, with the understanding that I'll be working with Ms. Borges to clarify these concerns about the various boundaries in her direct question.
Okay. All right. We've been going at this for almost an hour and a half. I expect that may be a good time to take a short break, Mr. Gish. I'd propose to take a 12-minute recess until 10:40.
That works for us.
Okay, great. All right, we'll be in recess until 10:40. Can you hear us, Mr. Gish? Mr. Gish, can you hear us? Are we on? Mr. Gish, we're good? Can you hear us?
You're on.
Okay. Mr. Gish, can you hear us? Write a big sign that says, Mr. Gish, can you hear us? I assume the answer is no, though. Mr. Gish, can you hear us?
I can, thank you.
Oh, great. Okay. Would you like to call your next witness?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Fleming Solar calls Ms. Audrey Bojorquez.
Ms. Borquez, is that correct? Okay. Would you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
I do.
Okay. Please state your name and address for the record.
Audrey Bojorquez. My address is 9209 Bayshore Bend, Austin, Texas, 78726.
Mr. Gish, you may ask.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bojorquez, could you provide your job title and employer, please?
I'm the Asset Development Director for Core Solar.
And Ms. Bojorquez, in your role as Asset Development Director, were you involved in the preparation of the materials that comprised Fleming Solar's application in this matter and the responses to requests in this matter?
Yes.
And do you have any corrections or modifications to those, the application materials or responses to data requests?
I do not.
And can you briefly describe your role in this project?
Sure. I've been with this project since the beginning, since the initial conversation with Mr. Andrew Wood. I co-manage a lot of the development activities with Mr. Salinas. I did take a leadership role in preparing the site assessment report and other application documents for the siting board certification process, and also managed some of our subcontractors involved in the SAR studies.
Thank you, Ms. Bojorquez. I'm going to ask you a few questions to follow up on Mr. Salinas' testimony in relation to questions asked by the chairman. Do you still have Exhibit A to the application materials available?
I think we pivoted to another. One second, sorry.
And Mr. Chairman, you still have your copy handy, correct?
I sure do.
All right. Okay, yes, I'm there.
Right. And so this is the document that's described as potential project footprint and nearest residences. Is that
Correct.
Is that what you have? Okay. And it has the maroon line, yellow line, pink lines with X's, and a bunch of teal dots on it. Is that correct?
Correct.
So I think in order to help clarify the situation, I think maybe we should talk about what it is each of these lines represent. So the maroon line is the project boundary. Is that right, Mrs. Bojorquez?
Correct.
Right, and that line represents the full extent of the land that Fleming Solar has rights to develop on, correct?
Correct.
And that's the the parcel boundaries or the specifics of each lease is, and those are represented in the agreements that were filed as Exhibit A to the first set of data requests. Is that correct? Okay. And so the yellow line, which is the potential project footprint, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And that is set with two separate setbacks in mind. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So it was set with a 50-foot setback from roads and parcels where there are no nearby residences. Is that correct?
Correct.
And a nearby residence is a residence within 300 feet of the project boundary. Is that right?
Yes.
So if you look at that map at the, I guess we'll call it the northwest corner of the project, you see the maroon line and then the yellow line, which looks to be almost on top of it, but it's 50 feet back from that. And is that because those parcels that are adjacent to that, on those parcels that are adjacent to that section, there are no residences within 300 feet?
That's right.
Right. In fact, you see the black dots on Whitman Road there. Those represent residences that are outside of 300 feet. Is that right?
300 feet from the boundary, correct?
From the boundary, yes, property boundary. That's correct. Okay. So the other setback is 300 feet from the property boundary of an adjoining parcel where there is a nearby residential structure. Is that correct?
From the project's boundary, if there's a nearby road.
Residential structure. Right. So if you look at along Route 59, I guess it's the you look over by where you see the C in the church along which road is that?
Lennon or?
Yeah. You see the number 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, right?
Yes.
Those all represent residences that are within 300 feet of the project boundary. Is that right?
That's right.
And then so the potential project footprint is set back 300 feet from the project boundary on those locations, right?
Yes.
So you see in, again, this is maybe a little hard to view from the scale of this, but where the residence is within that parcel is irrelevant as long as because the property boundary, as long as the residence is within 300 feet. That's true. If you look at number 16, which is on Old Convict Road, in the very southwest corner of the project.
Yes.
Right, and you see that the property boundary jogs around the parcel where residence number 16 is located, correct?
Correct.
But the potential project footprint line is 300 feet from the project boundary, not from the residence. Is that right? Right. And so the closest distance, theoretically, that any residence could be to the potential project footprint is 300 feet, but that would require that the residence be located on the property boundary. Is that correct?
On there, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And that's why you see in the distance to the project footprint that was in Table 1 in the noise and traffic study, that the nearest residences themselves are more than 300. They're more than 300 feet. They are 300 feet, 360 feet, 620 feet, and that's a function of where those properties are located within their own parcel. Is that right?
Right.
Right.
And so that we.
Oh, go ahead.
Also that we might not be placing an inverter at the maximum distance that we needed to, or that we could have.
That's right. And so then the next set of lines on this map in Exhibit A is the pink line with the X in it. You see that, right?
I do. I did want to say one thing about the footprint. You mentioned there was the two setbacks that it took into consideration. The lollipop shape that was referenced earlier by the chairman, that is an exception. It's not based off of the setback from a residence, a nearby residence. That's just because the landowner, Mr. John Sayre, owned a barn that we were going to exclude from this project layout indefinitely. So I just wanted to clarify that.
It's a separate negotiated setback for that particular non-residential structure.
Correct.
Correct. So the pink line is the security fence line. Is that right?
From the original layout that was submitted.
Right.
Yes.
And you have since submitted a revised project layout. Correct?
Yes.
Yes, and it was Exhibit A to the responses to the first set of discovery responses. Is that correct? I'm sorry, Exhibit A was the site control. I'm sorry. But Exhibit C is the updated preliminary site layout, right?
It was submitted in the first data response. I don't know what exhibit it was offhand. I have to look.
And that preliminary site layout shows the planned location of the panels, inverters, transformers, and other project generating equipment. Is that right?
Yes,
And that could possibly change.
that's right.
Right. And I'm going to say it's unlikely, they don't anticipate it changing, but there is the potential for it to change.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. And so the pink line here represented where the panels, inverters, transformers, collection lines would be located based on the site layout as of the time of the application. Is that right?
That's right.
Great. And that pink line is within the project footprint.
Yes.
Right. And so when so the purpose of the project footprint here is that with the 300-foot setback, all of the studies, especially the noise and visual studies, address distances, project components 300 feet from neighboring property boundaries, knowing that that was the closest you would be to the property boundary, and then it would be a few more feet to the residence. Is that correct?
Right.
And so the purpose of, and so then when the actual project layout is within that, you have essentially produced a study that shows, I don't want to say the word, the most impacts, or identifies the most impacts at that 300-foot line. Is that correct?
Right.
Right. And so the statement that within the project footprint, moving project components shouldn't be considered material, that's based on moving the types of equipment that are identified in the noise study within the project within the project footprint. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right. So if you were to use like the chairman's example of a 15-foot tall system as opposed to the 4 to 6 foot tall system, that would be material impact, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and if you were to use some new inverter that produces twice the noise of the standard inverters on the market now, that would be material impact, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and so the intent of that statement was that within the project footprint, and perhaps clarifying it to be within the, using the equipment that is available on the market now and is consistent with what's described in the studies, that those changes shouldn't be material. For example, if you move panels, 20 feet here and there, or 30 feet here and there, or 50 feet here and there, that would be considered material. Is that correct?
Right.
There was also some questions about the, on the noise and traffic study about the, on page 2 about the setbacks for the transformer inverters and other equipment, correct? Right. And there was a setback established for the GSU transformer, the HVAC of 300 feet, is that correct?
That's right.
And then the inverters of 300 feet from project boundary, again, not from the project footprint, but from the non-participant parcels with nearby residences. So the parcels with the teal dots, that's 300 feet, and then 150 feet from other parcels. Is that correct?
Right.
So that would be within a further setback within the potential project footprint. Is that correct?
That would be the, yes, that's right.
Yeah. And then all other equipment, it's 30 and it's essentially within the project footprint. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. And so I think it may be clearer to state that within the project footprint and the setbacks and the equipment specific, if materials were moved within the project layout, within the project footprint, and consistent with the equipment-specific setbacks identified in the application, there would be no material impact. Is that correct?
Right. That's right.
Okay. And then there was another question. I think the chairman had some questions about we've seen the visual study with this project layout, and some concerns about, well, what happens if you move the layout? How will we know if the project, that the visual screening methodology would work? And can you describe how the visual screening methodology would work if there was a change in the project layout?
Sure. GAI consultants performed a visual screening optimization analysis for us when we iterated on our first version of the layout. So they took into consideration not only a site visit where they surveyed the nearby residences and the thoroughfares. They also used Google Earth and assessed the existing topographic lines for the area in order to provide us with recommended buffer locations, also taking into consideration existing vegetation that exists. And so basically we would commission an additional study of similar scope and of a similarly qualified consultant to optimize the revised and final layout so that the buffers are placed in locations where they provide the maximum benefit to nearby residents or other receptors.
And this visual study, the optimization methodology was provided as Appendix D to the site assessment report. Is that correct?
One second. It's attachment A within Appendix D, the landscape review is what it was titled, Landscape Review Attachment A, Landscape Review Exhibit.
This consultation and updating of the optimization review was a proposed mitigation measure by the company in its application. Is that correct?
Can you repeat the question?
The performance of the visual optimization study on a final layout was already a proposed mitigation measure by the company.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
That's planning to do that.
I don't know. I'm happy to turn Ms. Glarkes over to questioning. I don't know if we want to. I'll let you guys go. But I don't know, Mr. Chairman, if you had additional questions on the layout and the various buffers, you wanted to get to that now, or you wanted to get through it when you cycle back around. So obviously it's up to you. But I just want to, since we're on the topic.
Yeah, I think I'll wait and see what questions the other members have and signing board staff may have.
Okay. With that, I turn Ms. Glarkes over to questioning.
Mr. Mance, do you have any questions?
I only have one, just the question that was deferred earlier. once again, in referencing the board's, Fleming's responses to the consultant report, recommendation B4 regarding compatibility with scenic surroundings, essentially, Fleming requests that the obligation to address to provide a visual buffer between project infrastructure and residences be limited just to 300 feet. It was our understanding that there are an additional 33 residents within 600 feet that are still within the view of the project. We're just asking for a specific reason why Fleming should not be obligated to also address those neighbors' concerns regarding visual buffer as part of its, and use of its best efforts under the complaint resolution program.
Sure. We, in forming our response, the most important thing to us was that we include some distance metric, just so there is a parameter that we can objectively work with. We use 300 because we know that, or we base that off of a response from AUG's project, trying to aim for consistency across the projects. However, we are very willing to increase that distance to the siting board feels appropriate, and if 600 makes sense, then we could accommodate that. Again, we just really wanted to make sure there was some metric in that mitigation measure so that we could effectively analyze that. That is a fair point, but you're correct that there are not that many projects that aren't participating that would be within that distance.
Thank you. That was my only question.
Deputy Secretary, do you have any questions?
Just one, Mr. Chairman. I'm looking at the Exhibit C, the updated preliminary site layout in the first response to data request. And this may not be material, but what, I can't tell from the legend, what are the yellow crossed hatched polygons?
Sure. We realized in the second version of this layout that was dropped from the legend. In the first version, those hashes were still there. That is the most suitable area for pollinator habitat as recommended by GAI.
Okay.
In our mitigation measure. Okay, sure.
Thank you. That was important then. Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Rowland?
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Rowland, any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair?
Just one, and I'm going to beat a dead horse, but I'm hoping I can make this somehow clearer for me. If you're still on the Exhibit C, the updated site plan, the same drawing that the Secretary was just referring to, you've got the what I would call inside the fence lines, which is the pink, and then the heavy kind of lime green. Is that boundary set? Do you expect changes to that line?
To the pink or the green line?
Yes.
Yes. Well, the pink line, generally that line will follow the panel field, the PV array. So should that shift slightly in the final design, if it's further inside, then the security would be there as well. So there might be some slight changes to that. And as far as the green line that surrounds the substation, utility substation and project substation, that could change depending on what the utility requires.
Okay. So if the pink line shifts closer to the project boundary, would you consider that material?
We would not shift it closer to the boundary in excess of the potential project footprint.
Okay. I think I'm clear now. Thanks. That's it.
Commissioner Butler?
Not at this time. My questions have already been asked.
I do have a couple of follow-up questions. The first is fairly straightforward. Are any homes participating or non-participating? Well, let me take a step back. Would any panels under the applicant's proposal be placed within 150 feet of a home, whether that is a participating or non-participating homeowner?
If it is a participating landowner, we would not place panels closer than 50 feet unless otherwise negotiated with the landowner.
Okay.
Or for non-participating landowners, it would not be any closer.
Okay, so taking a step back, when I say 150 feet, that's to a residence or a church, right? So the 50 feet you were discussing earlier is to the property boundary, as I understand it, or the project boundary. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so do you know if you all plan on placing panels closer than 150 feet to the actual residence of participating landowners?
We in our current layout, I don't think we have that. However, the potential project footprint does extend up to 50 feet if it's a participating landowner who does have a residence on site.
Okay, so do you all, in addition to central inverters, intend, at least to your knowledge, intend to use string inverters?
No.
Okay. With regards to central inverters, do you anticipate under your proposal that central inverters will be placed within 450 feet of non-participating residences?
300. If I understood the question correctly, can you repeat it actually?
Yeah, so everything that I'm reading in terms of the proposed setbacks is, and I think this gets to maybe the distinctions that maybe Mr. Gish was trying to ask when he was, or get to when he was seeking his questions. As I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, the filter, for the lack of a better term, for determining whether these greater setbacks than 50 feet are required is whether there is a parcel of land within 300 feet of the project boundary. Is that right? With a home on it, with a home on it.
With a home, yes. If there is a residence on a parcel and that parcel's boundary is within 300 feet of the project's boundary, yes.
Okay, and then the setback is the 300-foot setback that you're discussing is from that parcel boundary, not necessarily from the home. It just applies because there is a home on that boundary. Is that correct?
It's 300 feet from our project's boundary, not the landowner's parcels, the non-participating landowner's parcel boundary. It's just made it simpler that way to set back from our project's boundary because it would be a more uniform setback. And that would be in excess of if we set back from the non-participating parcel boundary.
Right, and that's
more conservative.
That's what I'm trying to understand. So the filter is a parcel of land with a home, right? That's the first thing. And then if that is closer to the project boundary than 300 feet, then that's the trigger, right? And then at that point, you're then making sure that from your own project boundary that the setback is 300 feet. So it could be across the road. It could technically be the project boundary, a road, a parcel of land, and then this this home or this land with a residence could be on the other side of that parcel, as long as it's a parcel of land with a home within 300 feet, that the parcel is within 300 feet of the project boundary. Is that correct?
That's right. And in that footprint map that we provided, the teal color points were those that met that trigger threshold, and the black were those that were beyond that threshold.
So the 300 feet for determining those teal homes and the 300-foot setback are measured from different places. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. Or I guess they're both measured from the project boundary, but they're going in different directions. Right?
Correct.
Okay. So it could be 599 feet technically between the setback and the property boundary that we're talking about that has a home on it. The project footprint, excuse me.
The distance from the residence.
Well, so that's
to
what
that.
that's what I want to be clear about. I can't, so here's, let me just ask this example. So you have this map that we were talking about earlier that shows the 300-foot setback for the project boundary against the project footprint, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that's 300 feet. That's the measurement for the setback. But the measurement to determine about any participating, non-participating landowners that fall in the filter, we'll call it, right, the trigger, is from the maroon line to a property that happens to have a residence.
And that the residence, that if that property is within 300 feet of the project boundary and has a residence.
Okay, but so you're measuring to the property boundary of the land that has the residence, not the residence itself.
Correct, which would be even more conservative than if we had done it from the residence itself.
Okay. So I take from table 1 on table 1 of the noise and traffic study report that the distance to nearest inverter to nearby residence 21 at 736 feet. Well, let me ask it this way. Do you have any reason to believe that these distances are incorrect or should be updated?
I believe we provided updated measurements based on the revised layout in data request 1 responses.
Okay.
I can try and find that. This one's so slow. I'm looking back at these tables that we provide. I'm not sure if we did one specifically with inverters to residences.
Well, so I'll ask Mr. Mance then to make this easier, if he'll ask a post-hearing data request to determine if the information in table 1 needs to be updated or if there's more accurate information. or updates. So going back, is it your understanding that there won't be an inverter placed within 450 feet of a residence?
I don't understand how you're getting the 450 number versus,
Yeah, I'm just asking the 450 number, as that's been the distance that has previously been ordered as a mitigation requirement and other findings.
I see it. Yeah, no, I mean, we are committing to nothing within 300 feet from our project boundary if there is a nearby residence. The distance that we provided in the noise report was based on that layout at the time. There have been some shifts, particularly in the northeast portion of our project, where I think maybe that closest inverter, the distance, I believe, has become even more further set back. But again, we're trying to not focus too much on where the inverter is in our current version of this layout. That will change. However, we are providing assurance that it would never be closer than 300 feet from our project boundary if there's nearby residents.
Right, but what I'm asking is the distance between operating equipment and a residence, which is the most, or the church, which are the two most likely noise receptors, and the items that will be closest for visual impacts. Does that make sense? Your old setbacks are from a project boundary, but there's no determination as to the distance between the project boundary and a nearby residence or noise receptor. Because you all based your first filter strictly off of how far another person's property with a residence was from the project boundary, and then proposed your setback based off of your own project boundary. So let's just say, for instance, an adjoining property owner has a residence that's, let's say it's a legacy home that was built maybe a little while back, and it was right on a property, right? It was 5 feet from the edge of their property, the adjoining property. That in essence, you could put an inverter and it would be 305 feet away from the home, right? Because your setback is only 300 feet from the proposed boundary of your own property. And so what I'm asking is in regard to actual noise receptors for the purposes of this noise study, if you know the distances under the current plan from inverters, the substation, proposed substation, and individual panels.
No, we can provide that in a subsequent request.
Okay, we'll file that in writing, and it would just be helpful.
The noise study was, the conclusion of the noise study, was based on that 300-foot setback, so that the noise levels that would be experienced beyond that point would apply, if whether it was 300 or 305 feet.
Okay, then you were talking about agreement earlier, and you're proposing the 50-foot setback for those participating landowners. Do you have written agreement to that distance from any of the participating landowners?
No.
So I guess why was it determined that participating landowners deemed to need a shorter setback than those non-participating landowners?
Well, in the lease agreement, we have been assigned rights to the entirety of the project area unless we did negotiate not removing a barn or something of that nature. So that was understood with the landowners.
Well, I mean, is that a specific, I'm not asking you to make a legal determination, but is it your understanding that that's a specific term in the lease, that property that doesn't fall under the lease will be allowed to have those generating, that operating equipment closer to a residence than any other mitigation measure that's being proposed?
No, Mr. Chairman, I don't think we're there yet, but I remind you that our lease terms are still subject to our motion for confidential treatment, and we still have time for that. I don't think we're at that point yet, but I want to be careful about discussing commercial terms of our leases as opposed to other companies' leases that might get into confidential information
Yeah, and I'm happy to go into confidential session if you deem that to be something that you all
No,
want to
I don't
continue to
think
have
that,
your.
I just want to.
Yeah, and if you want to reserve your right on the entirety of the lease conversation, that's your right. I think you only get the order on Monday yes, Monday. So I don't know that you all determine whether you're going to, avail yourself of your rights under law in the next 27, 28 days, or I guess it's really 33 that you have. But if you want to go into confidential session to discuss the lease, that's fine. I'm wanting to understand the purpose of the 50. And if it's a term of the lease, then let's go into confidential session and discuss it. But I just want to know, is there some agreement with the landowners related to the land that's not part of the not part of the proposed, I want to get it right, the proposed boundary, that how close generating or equipment can be to residences?
No, in our lease agreement, we have the rights to the entire parcel, and that would include residences with the ones where we have the traditional option to lease or purchase. And we do work closely with our landowners as we are deriving these site layouts, getting feedback on what areas they would prefer us to avoid or site around, but they also understand that we do have that, they've signed over those rights to us, and we just work with them and make the best efforts to accommodate accordingly.
Do you have non-participating landowners who have residences that are not subject to a lease or a purchase agreement?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, do you have homeowners that have residences that are participating in the project, but that the parcel of land in which they live on or that their home sits on is not under any agreement with the applicant or with Fleming Solar?
I do not think so. We can provide further verification post-hearing request.
Okay. So we'll ask that in a post-hearing data request. Do you have a map? You have a map that provides for the potential project footprint and nearest residences that we were discussing earlier, that I was discussing earlier with Mr. Salinas. It doesn't necessarily distinguish. It provides in the legend for nearest residential structure. Do you have, let me first ask, for nearest residential structure, are those exclusively non-participating residential structures, or is that the universe of all residential structures that fell into the 300-foot from project boundary filter?
If we're talking about that same exhibit, I believe we distinguished participating residences in a white box or white square. Can you repeat that question?
Yeah. Does teal indicate the entire universe of residences that are on property within 300 feet of the project boundary, or does teal represent just those non-participating landowners that fall under that filter?
That just the non-participating and the white squares are the residences that clearly they're actually within the project boundary itself. So.
Well, so the reason I asked, do you have that available to you?
Yes, it's in the.
Okay. So at the bottom part, there's the green for where the proposed substation is. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. And then to the right of that is a residential structure participating. Do you see that? But immediately across the road from that, I would assume the distance between that is just merely the width of the road and the right-of-way between the project boundary and that other property. There is effectively a square property with a residence on it. Do you see that?
Is the residence the black dot that you're referring to?
It is. That's what the legend would indicate. Do you see that? How is that not, how is that, I'm asking, why is that not a teal dot or a white square?
Oh, you're saying because that the parcel boundary appears like it would be within 300 feet? But I'll have to follow up with you on that one. That's a good question. I'll get you an answer to that.
Okay, and the same question would be for, do you see residents 17 and 16? In the bottom left-hand corner? I'm curious how far away that residence that is just outside, do you see that beyond that corner? That's above a 300-foot setback and to the right of 559, do you see that dot?
Yes.
Can you provide in a post-hearing data request the distance from the project boundary of that dot?
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to be, one, I guess, last question. Or last set of questions. Never believe an attorney when they say they have one last question. There's a home, or what appears to be a residence, in the upper right-hand corner of the largest piece of property, or the largest area of the project, as indicated by that square dot. Do you see that? Well, that's not a very fair question to ask you. Do you see homes 7 and 8 on that document? Okay, as you move west from 7 and 8, there looks to be a residential structure participating. Do you see that? And is that anticipated to continue to be inhabited throughout the operation of the project?
No, it doesn't. No.
Okay. And then the same goes for the other two homes that lie in the project boundary. The one at the bottom along Highway 559, is that intended on being inhabited through the operation of the project?
That would be up to the landowner, Mr. Andrew Wood.
Okay.
He's currently.
That's fine. It's very unfair to me to ask you what's going to happen over the next 20 or 40 years. I'm just asking, effectively, is it your plan for it to cease being inhabited? And the same goes for the project at the top right-hand corner, near the barn that we were discussing earlier. Is it your plan for that to not be inhabited during the operation of the project?
No, that is not our plan.
In addition to the question that we'll ask in a post-hearing data request, I did have it on here and I forgot to mention it, there's an additional residence that would seem to indicate from this map would fall under that 300-foot, filter, and it's a residence that's reflected as a dot to the left of Highway 559 in the bottom right-hand corner of the map. Do you see that residence?
Can you redirect me to that one more time?
Yeah, that's fine. So the main portion of the project would look like somewhat like a rectangle, but for a large parcel of land in the southwestern portion of the map. Do you see that?
Yes.
And there's a rectangular piece of land that adjoins on two sides the project boundary. And the land is located directly above the Highway 559 indication on the map. Do you see that?
Are you talking to the west of number?
To the west, yeah, to the southwest of the project?
To the west of number 16? Just so we,
Yes.
yeah.
That seems to be, from this map, a contiguous property, at least from the legend's use of white lines. And there seems to be a residence on that contiguous property. So that also as a post-hearing data request, in addition to that other property directly across from the substation, we'll just ask why it was not included along with the other Teal homes as part of this map and as part of the proposed mitigation.
Okay.
All right, those are all the questions I have, Mr. Gish. Do you have any redirect?
I do, a couple, and I think this might address some of the questions you just asked, and it address the filters that you described as a way to figure out where the 300-foot setback to the property boundary was established. So, Ms. Orcas, if you could look at this exhibit A that we've been talking about, and can you find property number 6? Up near the northeast, it's on the west side of the northeast project parcel. Did you find it?
That's me.
Yeah.
Yes, sorry.
Yes. That's okay. Okay, so the chairman asked you kind of how you go about determining what residences would trigger this 300-foot setback from the property boundary. And I think the first question, as I understood it, and you correct me, and maybe I should ask this question, so I will, is the first thing you do is to look and see whether the parcel borders the project boundary.
Yes.
Yes, okay. And then is the next step to determine whether or not there is a residence on that, or a residence on that parcel?
I don't know if I answered correctly to your first question, because if it was across the road, it wouldn't necessarily be, immediately adjacent. In fact, I think I was going to, in this post-hearing request, go back and look at our methodology, because I think it might have been that nearest, as we say in the legend, nearest residential structures that are within 300 feet of the project boundary. That implies that it's the residential structure itself and not the parcel boundary, as we were just discussing. So that's something I'm gonna triple check.
Well, I think this number 6 is an example of this, right? So the parcel that number 6 is on is adjacent to the project boundary, correct?
Right.
And there's a residence that's within 300 feet of the project boundary. That's number 6, right?
Right.
So if you see the yellow line to the east of the project boundary, that reflects 300 feet from the parcel that number 6 is on, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. And then the parcel that's above the parcel to the north of, I guess kind of to the north and west of the parcel where number 6 is on, is also adjacent to the project boundary, correct?
Which parcel?
The parcel so if you look at the number 6 parcel, the parcel to the north that kind of surrounds it,
Oh.
that's adjacent to the project boundary as well, correct?
Right. Oh, yes. I see where you're going.
Yeah. And then the residence, though, which is that black dot, is greater than 300 feet from the project boundary, correct?
That's right.
Right. So that's why there's no 300-foot setback from that parcel. There's only a 50-foot setback because there is no, quote, nearby residence as defined in this analysis, right?
That's correct.
You guys say it loud.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, and so this setback is tied to where the residence is on the adjoining property, not where the adjoining property is, correct?
Correct.
Is that right?
Yes. Are we having some,
Oh, there's
can you not
something-
hear me?
Now we can hear you. And so if you look at parcel number 17, which is at the south part of the project, just south of Old Convict Road and 559, that residence is within 300 feet of the boundary, correct?
Oh, yes.
Which is why the footprint bumps out there, right?
Correct.
And then as you go east along 559, you come to this rectangular parcel with a black dot at the southern end of it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and so that parcel is more than 300 feet from the project boundary. Or that residence is more than 300 feet from the project boundary, correct? Right. So that's why there's no bump out in that. There's no setback from the project boundary on that, from that parcel. Is that correct?
That's right.
I have no further questions.
All right, Mr. Gish.
This entire exercise was designed to make this simpler.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I know.
Yeah.
It's, as Mr. Sanford sort of lectured me on the other day, here in a hearing, that sometimes no good deed goes unpunished. It's not always in the attempt. Sometimes it's just in the reception is the problem. So I just have a couple of questions here so that I'm clear. That the filter is that the residence itself is within 300 feet of the property boundary. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then if the residence itself is within 300 feet of the property boundary, then get this term right, the potential project footprint then is going to be is proposed to be at least 300 feet from the project's boundary.
Correct.
All right, I appreciate it. Mr. Gish, do you have any additional witnesses?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Jenks, speak about construction.
All right.
The sort calls Randall Jenks to the stand.
Mr. Jenks, please make sure your microphone is off mute, and please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and correct under penalty of perjury?
Do.
All right, please state your name and address for the record.
Randall Jenks, or Randy Jenks, 24274 Invitation Oak, San Antonio, Texas, 78261.
Okay. Mr. Gish, you may ask.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Jenks, can you please identify your employer and your job title?
I'm employed by Core Solar. My job title is Vice President of Engineering and Project Execution.
Thank you, Mr. Jenks. Mr. Jenks, were you involved in the preparation of the application materials and responses to data requests in this case?
Yes.
And do you have any corrections or updates to those materials or responses?
No.
And Mr. Jenks, can you please briefly describe your role in this project?
I have several. I'm a member of the project team. I report administratively in this respect to the project manager. The intent is that I support the project from a technical perspective, handling or at least initiating interconnect application processes, working with the team to provide a layout for the project, projecting the performance of the project. And then as we move the project forward, we begin to engage in engineering, procurement, and construction aka EPC contractor, and that I support the administration as we move into finance and power sales.
Thank you, Mr. Jenks. Mr. Chairman, the witness is available for questioning.
Thank you. Mr. Mance, do you have any questions for Mr. Jenks?
Yes, sir. Mr. Jenks, if you could refer to Fleming Solar's responses to the consultant report, specifically response to recommendation A5. In that response, Fleming advises that it supports the concept of ensuring final construction schedule. Workforce estimates do not result in negative impacts that exceed those identified in the site assessment report. The request of Fleming Solar's potential obligation to support the siting board's efforts to revise its assessment of impacts and mitigation requirements be limited to changes in construction schedule or workforce estimate that result in traffic impacts that are of higher magnitude than those identified in the site assessment report. First, this is the question that Mr. Salinas deferred on. When speaking of the construction schedule, are you referring purely to the days of the week and time during the day when construction will be allowed, or are you referring to the expected length of the total project construction?
I would say the latter, all of the above, if you will. The days of the week, if we have any impacts in the number of people on the site or the duration.
Okay. And could you explain in detail Fleming's reasoning on why such an obligation should be limited solely to traffic impacts?
It's our intent that through the contracting process, we would be able to control effectively everything else. However, the number of employees on the site at any given time would be the responsibility of the contractor. So I would indicate that that would be the primary impact. There's a certain number of man hours estimated to be required to build this facility, and as allowable construction hours or other factors fit in, it would potentially increase the duration of the work because getting the number of man hours in would be under that curve.
And are you aware of any current changes expected to the construction schedule?
I am not aware of any changes we anticipate immediately. However, in due course, within a few months, we will engage an EPC contractor who will become responsible for the project, its execution, and its performance. And at that time, the contractor may come back and suggest changes, which we anticipate providing to you.
I believe the remaining question I have is regarding the decommissioning. Actually, I have no further questions.
Deputy Secretary Lyons?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Vice Chair Cubbage?
No questions.
Commissioner Butler? Commissioner Butler, do you have any questions?
No, not at this time, thank you.
I have no questions. Mr. Gish, do you have any redirect of this witness?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Gish, do you have anything else?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Okay. All right. And is there anything, I appreciate you have no more witnesses. Is there anything else that you feel like you need to bring in front of the siting board today?
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your time.
Okay. Anything, Mr. Mance, before we adjourn?
No, sir.
Okay. So, last thing we'll do is the data requests, Mr. Gish. I believe that we can get those. Today is Wednesday. We have a pretty busy afternoon here. I think we can get these data requests out to you by the end of the day on Friday, which will be October the 1st. How many days would you need, having heard the questions, do you think that you'll need you and your client to respond?
I think if we could have 10 days, I think that would be sufficient time.
So, how about October the 12th? It's a Tuesday.
Yeah, I'll look to see from client. Yep, Audrey's nodding her head, so I think that will work.
So we will, we can get those out by Friday for it to be responded on the 12th. I think the statutory date in this case is November the 24th, so that should give us plenty of time to get that out on time. Mr. Gish, as I'm sure you're aware, and it escapes me right now whether it's the regulation or the statute, but you're afforded an opportunity within a certain number of days following the evidentiary hearing to file a brief if you should choose to do so, but certainly not requiring you to do so. And then following the submission of the data request, the case will be the record will be closed and the case will be submitted to the commission. If you need additional time, Mr. Gish, from the procedural schedule that we put out following this in order to respond to the data requests, please just file a timely motion. Okay. All right, if there's nothing else, this hearing is adjourned.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.